The reports of our demise have been greatly exaggerated. Yes, the reports of both Jorge and JT together being on Shoot the Gap, and the fact that this was never happening again. Nobody really said that. I'm just doing that to open up the pod. Welcome to Shoot the Gap, folks. Our IDP Fantasy Football show here at Fantasy and Frames. We got an exciting show for you today. JT and myself are going to be talking about early redraft linebacker rankings. Look, we want fantasy points. We want tackles. We want those premier tacklers at the linebacking position. That's how you establish your fantasy point floor in your fantasy IDP league. So I'm excited. JT's excited. Let's get into it. Justin Taylor, I'm having deja vu because I feel like you and I were just on a show a couple hours ago.
And that we were, sir.
I know, right? Fantasy and Frames Wednesdays are back in full swing starting at 8 p.m. You have our Dynasty show, Dynasty 365, at 9 o'clock. We just finished Fourth in Frames, which is kind of like our longest running show that we cover everything in the world of fantasy football. As the fall starts to creep closer, we'll shift more to redraft mode there. But they do everything all year long. And then you get to us, the guys who cover the most awesome aspect of fantasy football, which is IDP Fantasy Football here at Shoot the Gap.
We got to bring it home. We're like the cleanup hitter, here at Shoot the Gap. We so everybody else gets in there, and then we just clean it up at the end here.
There you go. I'll take that. That works. But yes, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Late will get you the information you need and get you out of there so that you can, sleep or do whatever it is you do, at 11 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, Eastern time, of course. For those on the West Coast, you're not going anywhere. Just hang out. JT, so we're talking some linebackers here. Before we get into our rankings here and discussions about this, do you notice from year to year for redraft when you're doing your linebacker rankings that you're seeing a lot of volatility, or do you notice some consistency more often than not, especially like when you're talking like top 24?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at kind of the top end guys, you're usually seeing it be fairly consistent. There's more changes in the dynasty aspect because you got guys getting a little older, some younger guys. But usually what you have is pretty consistent, I think, in redraft. And then you see some of those young guys pop in that have a big year. And then they kind of move into that top 10 or 15 group. So I think for the most part, you see a lot of consistency because I feel like linebacker is one of the most consistent spots in fantasy football. Like those are the guys that usually if you're good, you're pretty good every year. And you're doing it, you're pretty solid every season. So I think that's the safest floor. But you just got no one to draft those guys, when to pick them. But I think for the most part, you don't see a lot of volatility. I think once a guy finally has a big year and moves in, he stays in for a while before he moves back out, unless a guy gets hurt. Injury concerns is the only time I really see guys drop big, when people are like, oh, he's coming off an injury. Maybe he drops fairly far in the redraft rankings as opposed to IDP. But I think they're fairly consistent year to year. But, you never know. You got to look at coaching changes. If you move to a different team, that always makes a difference these days. And I think we see a lot more of that, especially with the older linebackers. You'll see these guys move from team to team a little more often than you would earlier in their career.
You missed the perfect opportunity to sing the line from one of the most awesome songs in music history. You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done.
I left that open for you because you got a much better singing voice than me. Anybody that knows me and has ever heard me sing, I only do punk rock songs and heavy metal songs on karaoke night. That's all I can do. I do not have a good singing voice. So I love that. Nice job, Jorge. You killed that.
You want more of these dulcet tones? Come out to the Fantasy Football Expo. We do karaoke on Sunday night after the expo's over with. I'll serenade you all night long, folks.
Hoping to maybe stick around for that this year. Last year, I had to get home on Sunday. My buddy John had to work Monday morning early, and so we had to jet on Sunday. So we missed the karaoke. So hoping to stick around for that this year.
Before we get to that, actually, talking about John McGlenn here, you and him on a dynasty evaluation, a joint venture between Commissioner Evaluation and Fantasy and Frames here, had a really good episode talking about building projections for fantasy football. Can you give the listeners and viewers just a short recap of what that was about? Because it was a fantastic pod episode for those who haven't watched
Thank
it.
you. I appreciate it. We had Christian Williams on. Great guest. If you don't know Christian, go follow him. For sure. He's one of the main guys at Devi Royale. Does a ton of Devi C2C stuff, college stuff, but he also previously was at the Football Guys. He does a ton of rankings, ton of projections. And this is what I leave up to the smarter guys than me. I'll do rankings. I kind of have a good feel where guys are going to be, but that projections, you got to be in the sheets, as we used to say. Got to be in those Excel sheets. You got to be in those Word documents. You got to be on all that crazy stuff. Too much for me. I let smarter guys than me do the projections, and I kind of run my rankings off a lot of those. But Christian did a great job talking about how he kind of comes up with the projections, how he's kind of built his model over the years, where he started out and he's like, "Ooh, some of this isn't great. These are bad projections," and he's like kind of adjusted that over the years. So if you haven't had a chance, go check that out. The Dynasty Evaluation Pod with Christian Williams. He did a great job kind of talking about that. And hopefully, he says he's talking about maybe a joint venture where he starts doing some projections for college football, which is a huge task. That's the one kind of untapped thing out there right now is people are starting to get into college football, but no one does projections. Like if you go and like look at your every like anybody who plays fantasy football goes in there and is like, oh, 10.6 points is what he's projected this week, 15.75 points projected. There is none of that in college football. It's really hard to project when you have 130 plus teams, all the players on every team in week to week what they're going to score, because whether they're playing a juggernaut or they're playing, a basket case team, it's very hard to predict what guys are going to get. So he's talking about maybe trying to venture into that. I would love to see it because I have people ask me all the time. They're like, "You play a lot of CTC. Who should I play this week?" And I'm like, man, a lot of times for me, it comes down to opponent. And I try to stay away from that in the NFL unless it's like a glaring something like, oh man, this wide receiver has just been shut down by this cornerback every week. I try to stay away from that and play my studs, but it's a big thing in college football for sure. Like schedule can make all the difference. So really good episode. I appreciate you bringing it up. We had a great time talking to Christian.
And for those who are wanting to see more of that episode, head over to the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel. And while you're there, hit that notification bell and subscribe button so you're notified whenever the Fantasy and Frames crew puts out fantastic fantasy football content like we do. But enough of that. Let's get into some rankings. And Hawk2, number one on the list. Who's your number one linebacker there for redraft early this part of the season?
Yeah, so I think, we always talk about it on this show because we mostly talk Dynasty, but we do bring up redraft. And so I think there's always a little bit of that mindset when you've been in Dynasty all summer, all summer, all summer. You get to the end of the summer, now your redraft leagues are starting. And you got to kind of get rid of some of that Dynasty mindset, which for me, I will be honest, it's tough to do. I love the rookies. I love the young players. I love the draft. And so sometimes I have to remember, like, oh, some of these old guys are pretty good too. I kind of want some of them on my team. So I think definitely IDP is one of those where, the shiny toy is maybe not the thing you want year one, or if you're going to get him year one, you want to draft him late. You want to go after those producers, especially at linebacker. I feel like linebacker is the spot that if you don't score well in redraft IDP, I think your team's done. You just got to have good linebackers. So number one for me, he didn't score as high in a lot of redraft leagues last year, but I think he's going to have a bounce back. I just love the talent. I love the player. Roquan Smith, Baltimore Ravens. He's my number one still. I know some people are going to say, hey, some guys outscored him last year, but I just think he's the safest play I just love who he is, what he does, and that Ravens defense should be really good again. But I think they're going to be in a lot of dog fights. So I think he's going to see the field a lot and make a lot of tackles. The running back group in that league, especially in the AFC North, has gotten really good. I just think there's going to be a lot of battles in that league.
Yeah, it's hard to go against that, plus with losing Patrick Queen to free agency, going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, there is some vacant tackle opportunities that are going to be heading his way, I believe. And so, Roquan Smith, I cannot blame you at all for having as your number one. But there is something that I found that was rather interesting. I don't think he's had 100 solo tackle season in recent history. Let me pull up the stats right here. Or there's maybe like one. So going back to 2020, he in Chicago, he had a 98 solo tackle season, a 95 and 21 solo tackle season. 2022, he had his first 103 solo tackle season. And then he jumped down to 2023 with 84 solo tackles. But where he makes up for it is other areas. Obviously, the assisted tackles play a huge role. The volume of tackles that he accumulates for fantasy points is great. And then his big play ability, whether it's the sacks or the interceptions, he's just all over the field and can do so much that that it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Like it's kind of like you're banking on that upside to get him LB1 numbers, versus potentially other linebackers that have been giving you more consistent tackle floors that you may choose to rank higher or lower. But I think I can get behind that, to be honest with you, with Roquan Smith. But first of all, not very tall. I met him and actually have his autograph right above my finger right there. Very nice individual. But I'm noticing a lot of these NFL players not very tall. I did not anticipate that being the case.
Yeah, he's listed at 6'1". I think he is like barely pushing 6. I mean, he's right above 6 foot. He's not a super tall guy. And as someone who's 5'10", I know that that's not super tall. So,
but it came down to my linebacker one here. This was tough. And I feel like every year there's always something made about his missed tackle rate and how he's not, super efficient. And, then there's competition for tackles here, with Devin Lloyd and talking about Foye Lucan, excuse me. But I'm going to go in a different direction this year. And honestly, it's spicy, but I like it. I like it because the production has been there for years. And this player better than most players, as he used to be a former Indianapolis Colt, last year turned New York Giant. I'm going against the grain, going against the big names. I'd say Bobby Okereke is my LB1 last year, or this year heading into redraft. Again, these are early redraft rankings, but I really like what you saw from him. Back-to-back seasons, one in Indianapolis, 97 solo tackles, 52. So he gets you that established high tackle floor, going back to the Giants last year, first year, 92 solo, 57 assist. Man, it's just very hard to go against him. 11 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks. What really makes him stand out a lot is also his coverage abilities, or liabilities, however you want to look at it. 10 pass deflections, plays on the ball, 4 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. Again, similar to Roquan in the sense that you're banking on these impact plays to really push him into that upper echelon. But for me, I just feel like the Giants are going to be that great this year. It's going to be another year of the defense having to keep them in games longer than they should. More opportunities for the defense to rack up, garbage points, and the tackles go right there. And there's no real competition at the linebacker position, I believe, for consuming those tackles than for the Giants. Therefore, that's why I have Okereke spicily, if that's even a word, put in at my LB1 this year. All right. I know that's bold. What are your thoughts?
I actually like it a lot. I like where you're coming from on a ton of that. Here's why. I've got him on a ton of leagues. He was number 2 overall in scoring in one of my big IDP leagues, number 3 in another league for linebackers. So he was right up there. And I just looked at 2 of them. I just looked at 2 of my top. I'm at a few more, but he was top 2, 3, 4 in almost all my leagues. And I agree with you. I think the Giants are going to be bad. I think the Giants are going to be real bad, and I think they're going to be on the field a lot on defense. And I just think he's going to end up having to make a ton of plays. Part of the reason, and I hate to go too off a tangent, but that's kind of why I like Tyler Newman as a rookie so much. Was I was
Mm,
like, he's going to have to make a ton of tackles because with Xavier McKinney gone and this defense is just not super strong. I feel like those guys up the middle are the guys going to have to be making the plays. So I have him in my top 5, so I don't think that's crazy for you, and I actually really like where you're coming from on this. I actually had him as my number 5 on this list, and I actually, as I was looking at the list, kind of was trying to say, should I move him up more? And I was trying to figure out who I could move behind him because I wanted to move him up. Honestly, I did, but I was like, who would I move him behind? I actually think this is a really good pick. A linebacker makes tackles, safe floor, safe floor. You don't need huge, crazy plays from him to score points. And again, I think he's going to be on a bad defense where he's going to have teams up and running the ball against them. And what does he do? He tackles running backs. That's
right.
what he's good at. Oh, pound the ball up the middle all fourth quarter, all second half when we're dominating. And he just racks up 12, 13, 14 tackles. I actually really like that, Jorge. I think you're onto something there.
Thank you. I guess time will tell, right? And here's the thing: what I like about this now, I'm probably going against consensus out there, depending on the scoring system and format that you're playing with and league that you're in. But if I'm having him, but for me, I'm happy on multiple fronts because whether it's participating in an industry IDP league or a home league, I say Bobby Okereke is LB1. Others might say he's outside the top 12. I'm happy as a fantasy manager because I know I can get him and wait for him and get who I project to be the LB1 of 2024 in a few rounds later than somebody might pick a Wagner or a.
I
You
agree
know what
with
I
you
mean?
because here's the thing: is value. He's gonna be a good value. He's not a guy a lot of people are gonna like race up the draft board to get in a redraft. So if you want to take value and a guy who you think could be number 1, he has all the makings of that. A guy that you can probably draft is LB 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe. So you could get him a couple rounds later, some of these other guys, and he could be your number 1. You take the value with the upside. I'm loving it.
All right, JT, who you got as your LB2 heading into redraft this year for linebackers?
So Alukun, we talked about him for the Jags. I mean, he just keeps making tackles. He's up there every year. You got to have him. You pretty much always have to have him in the top 3 to 5, just because until he stops making a million tackles a year. I keep thinking other guys are going to dig into his production a little bit. It just doesn't keep seeming to happen. I was worried about the Jags kind of keeping him around, not because his stats were great, but whether they liked him that much. But got a deal. I think he's one of those guys. Safe floor. He just makes a million tackles. I got him right now as my number 2.
Same. It's hard to ignore, and the guy doesn't get enough respect. And you go back to his last year in Atlanta, where everybody was like, "Oh, Deion Jones is the linebacker. Oh, Luakon, he's just another guy. He puts up tons of tackles. He leaves in free agency. Falcons fans are like, oh, whatever. Oh, he's going to the Jags. The Jags are a homely team. Who cares about that? And he just keeps racking up tackles and having that solid IDP fantasy football floor. And just now in the offseason, a few weeks ago, they just re-upped him for 3 years. So
Yep,
he's
that's what I'm
not
saying.
going.
Now that he's staying, now that he's not going where. Yeah,
Yeah,
say now here I'm gonna say this. I don't know if this is controversial.
What you got?
Needs a nickname. Somebody's got to come
Yeah,
up with a really good
yeah.
nickname. Here's the problem. No one can say his name. His name is so I think I've said his name 875 different ways over the years.
All
He
right,
has such
how do you,
a hard name to pronounce. I think people like whenever they see I own bars and restaurants. When everybody sees a wine that they can't pronounce
just point
or a
to it?
beer they can't pronounce, they just don't order it because they're nervous. They're like, oh, I don't want to sound like a dumbass because I
Right.
don't know how to say that. I think his name is so hard to pronounce. If he got a marketing team and they came up with a really cool nickname where everybody could call him that and could forget about how to say his full name, I think he goes way higher. Honestly, I just think people are so nervous because he has such a hard name to say that I think if you figured out some kind of cool something named for him, and I really wish I had one sitting on top of my head. I just came up with this, so I'm like, I wish I had like a list of top 5 nicknames to give him, and we could vote on it. But maybe that's a new poll we'll have to put out on Fantasy and Frames. What should be his nickname? We need to come up with a couple cool nicknames and have some people give some listener answers. But he needs a really cool nickname, and I think it would make all the difference in the world for him.
I like where your head's at with putting up the poll, which we'll do. Um, but I feel like this is one of those cases where you could at players because I feel like they would want to be involved in like determining what their nickname is. And so I feel like if we put in like, at let's say Luakun, who I just probably butchered his name, or Luakon, excuse me. What do you want your nickname to be so that we can cheer you loudly each and every single week? I feel like that's not disrespectful. Now, normally,
Or does he have a nickname that his family call him? Does his family call him something?
oh yeah, exactly. Well, maybe
That's
they
it.
keep.
Hey,
He
you
keeps that
telling me
personal.
everybody
I
would
don't know.
like Tank Dell as much if he wasn't Tank?
I
No,
mean,
and
that's
then he's a great player, but people love it because his name's Tank. People love nicknames. People love the cool. People love Juju. People love like the cool names that you can say. Like people love that. That's when you can give your like initials and you know who you're talking about.
okay. So a couple
MHJ,
things,
Marvin Harrison Jr., MHJ. He's a
right?
stud. Oh, MHJ, you just, Bob, oh, Nuke. Oh, yeah, Nuke's awesome. Everybody loves a good nickname, especially when your name's hard to say.
So a couple things. So Pro Football Reference, for those who don't know, if you go type in a person's name, sometimes it tells you their nicknames. Obviously, there's not a nickname here, but a couple nuggets about Aluakin that I did not realize is that he played at Yale. Did you know he played at Yale?
I usually pride myself on knowing where basically every NFL player played in college. Like that's a huge thing for me. I want to know where they play because I love college football. I had no idea. If you would have
Well,
gave me 10 guesses, I wouldn't even been close. I had no idea.
Um, and then it gives you the pronunciation of players' names. So it's pronounced Foy Ye Sa De Oluakin. For yesterday. For yesterday. For yesterday. Oluakin, not Oluakin.
Maybe we can do something with Day. Since the end of his first name's like Day.
Hey,
I know
for
you have
yesterday.
Adrian Peterson was all day. Maybe we can do
Yeah.
something with Day. I'm going to think about this after
This
the
is
show. I'm going to come
we
up with
gotta
something
put
because I feel like, especially for IDP fantasy talk, we need an acronym. We need something short, a nickname that we can use for him. Because trying to type out his name, it never works. It always changes it to something else. You got to type it out 5 different times on your phone or on your computer. It always wants to change it.
so Nate Markham and I a couple of years ago we were doing shoot the gap when during the season talking about waiver wire edge rushers, and Agbania Okoronkwo was having a hot streak that year, and at the time we were having a hard time pronouncing, and then we gave him the nickname OGOK. It just flows. Play OGOK.
Another guy, yep, needs a nickname. It's better with the nickname.
I want a nickname. My nickname is Whore. Okay, that's not because my name's Jorge. Hey, Whore, what's going on? And I'm just like, so for those who are like, oh, why are you giving people nicknames? Because my nickname is Whore. Therefore, other people should have nicknames so they have at least a better nickname than me. Anywho, we're not going to get into that. Back to
I had
rankings
too
here.
many nicknames. I'm JT Orange, JT Brew, JT Parlay. I've got they're just endless. Go by too many things.
I love
I
it.
mean, you call me Jason, I'll go by Jason.
That's
So it happens.
fair enough. All right, let's get into our linebacker 3 then here. And I figure how long you want to roll. 12 linebackers, 24. What are your thoughts? Let's just randomly.
Yeah, I put down 15, my top 15,
Cool.
just in case. So you tell me how far you want to go to 15. I can come
Yep.
up with 5 more. I can guarantee it. But you tell me where we want to
Yeah,
end.
let's roll 15. That works for me. Uh, my number 3 linebacker here. Again, it's going against the grain here, but I'm looking at recent performance trends and I'm looking at snap percentages and who's going to be there for competition taking away tackles. And I don't see anybody taking away tackles from Ernest Jones the fourth for the Los Angeles Rams. I just love what he's done the past few years. The Rams employ more of a defensive back coverage scheme than employing 2 linebackers. It's normally they have just one linebacker out there. So Ernest Jones is going to get you the snaps. He's going to get you the opportunity. When you go back and you look at Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, which is where I base a lot of my fantasy football rankings from, just because I take part in the Fantasy Pros ECR competition where we have to abide by certain point values for play. I mean, outside of 2 games last year, the guy had double-digit fantasy points in the mid to high teens and 20s. I mean, the guy is as consistent as they come, plays very well, getting to the ball, and again, doesn't have to worry about the competition for tackles. Is it Rosenboom who's the other linebacker? Yeah, Christian
Yep,
Rosenboom.
and I've got Rosenboom in a couple leagues that are deep leagues where you got to start 3 linebackers, and then we have 2 flex. And so linebackers just get eaten up, like they're on every roster. So I got Rosenblum on one of my teams only because injuries last year. I was desperate just to find guys to play, but he plays so little percentage. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what he actually played last year, but it was like 50% or less for snaps. It was not a high percentage of snaps. So they like you said with Ernest Jones, the Rams love to play one linebacker sets. They just do. And so they only play 2 linebacker occasionally. And Rosenblum is not a great linebacker. And he comes in just when they want to play like a bigger, heavy set against the run. But other than that, it's Jones. And I think it's Jones to stay. I love what you said. There's no competition. Nobody, Rosenblum's not going to take any of his snaps away. So I love where your head's at there. I had Ernest Jones. I like him a lot. I'm still feel like there's upside. I'm a little higher on him in Dynasty just because I think he's got a long career. I had him at number 6 on
Okay.
my list for redraft, but I think, like you said, he's not coming off the field. The way the Rams play their defense, he's going to be on there all the time. And there's no one really to take any snaps away unless he gets hurt. Like, unless he's hurt, there's no way he's coming off the field.
Before we get to your next linebacker, let's give a shout out to some people in the chat here. First of all, thank you all who are staying up late or getting up early, depending where you are in the world. Speaking of where you are in the world, one of our correspondents for Fantasy and Frames from all the way in Serbia, Peter Petrovic, who you can find more of his content at fantasyinframes.com. Greetings to you, sir. Thank you for getting up early and watching us here. Then Bayou Bengal Fantasy Network, you have been all over our shows here commenting, whether it's on the weekend or on Fantasy and Frames Wednesdays and Thursdays. We really appreciate you stopping by. Stopping by before he goes to bed. Keep killing the content. We'll try. I'm enjoying the replays. Love it. Thank you very much. That's what we're here for, to help you have fun playing fantasy football and to, entertain you. That's
we just got Peter in his first C2C league. So pumped about that.
nice.
We have a draft in July. I reached out to a bunch of people and said, hey, is anybody interested who has never played before or wants to get in? He was like, I would love to try it. So we got it lined up. We got a draft in July coming up. So pretty
Nice.
pumped about it. So I've been trying to give him some pointers. I told him reach out if he's got any questions about some stuff. College is a different game because there's way less information out there, but it's super fun. So I always tell people, first step, get yourself in an IDP league. Second step, get yourself into a college league, a CFF or a C2C league. It's so fun.
And for college fantasy football, funny that you mentioned that, because the host of Fourth and Frames last hour, Chris Battistel, is a college fantasy football junkie. You can listen to him and Mike Haas do their One Foot Down podcast as we get closer to the college football season on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. Look for the content there. And basically, if there's anything college fantasy football / Fantrax related, Chris Battistel is probably involved. So if you ever have any questions when it comes to looking into players or finding leagues to participate in or anything and everything college fantasy football and Fantrax, he is your go-to guy at FF Chris B on the X machine.
Yeah, I was going to jump in real quick, Chris. Me and him for Scott Fishbowl 14. For anybody knows who didn't get in, they actually added a Fantasy Cares Eliminator college this year. There's a couple college ones. So me and Chris got in one of the college ones together. So we did our draft ended, I think, a week or two ago. So we're going to have a show coming up on a One Foot Down podcast where we're going to break down our teams, my team that I picked, his team, and kind of the league where everybody drafted. Should be super fun. Whoever wins that gets an automatic bid next year to Scott Fishbowl 15. So cool thing, but it was one of the first years they've ever done college. So me and him were two of the first guys on top. We're like, we got to get in this. And also obviously goes to a great cause of Fantasy Cares and Toys for Tots for the kids. So, but yeah, it's going to be a really fun, interesting one. So I know we're trying to line up a time to do that, but we're definitely going to have that coming up soon where we break down our drafts in that league.
Love it. Love it. Let's keep breaking down some of our rankings here. I told you at 3 I had Ernest Jones. Who was your LB3 heading into 2024?
Number 3, he's down on a lot of people's lists because of the injuries last year, but I love Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton, Kansas City Chiefs. He's my guy, my Mizzou guy. I loved him coming out of college. He was a tackle machine at Mizzou. I was in a ton of leagues where I have co-owners, and I'm like, we have to get this guy in IDP leagues. We got to get him. And they're like, I trust you. If you say we got to get him, I'm like, he's a beast. So he's fallen down. He's a little bit of a nice buy now because he was so high last year because of the year he had before and then, he's a non-call away from possibly being Super Bowl MVP. If they don't call that a play, I mean, he just had a fantastic Super Bowl. So he's one of my guys. I think he has a big bounce back year. Kind of like you're talking about Ernest Jones with the one play. They play pretty much only 2 linebackers. And with Willie Gay finally gone from the Chiefs, I think he settles in. There, it's been a little bit like, who do we play, who we not? Drew Tranquil, he came over from the Chargers. He was one of those guys in the mix. I think now they're like, hey, we like Tranquil and Bolton. Those are our 2 guys in our 4-2-5. So I love that. I think he has a big year again, and especially any league where you get like really nice bonus points for sacks, turnovers, interceptions. He's just one of those guys. He ends up filling the stat sheet. He gets a little bit of everything. I just think he has a real big bounce back this year. He's super high in my IDP rankings for Dynasty, but I still love him in redraft as well.
All right, I'll give you my. I'll do 4 and 5 real quick because we already talked about him a little bit. My LB4 is Roquan Smith, going back to the tackle vacancy. There has to be a better expression for what I'm trying to say, but Patrick Queen not being there, there's more opportunity for tackles there. I don't care whoever they fill in.
I think Trenton Simpson ends up playing, but I think you're right. I think Roquan ends up getting. I don't know if he gets a ton more solo tackles, but I feel like he could end up with a ton of assisted tackles trying to help out Trenton Simpson this year. So I think there's definitely a lot of that there. And there's going to be a learning curve there without Patrick Queen gone. And I think Smith's going to think he's a captain. He's going to be like, I have to make these plays and make up for the difference. So I could see a huge year incoming for Roquan.
That's also very telling of potential dynasty. We're talking about redraft, but that's something to pay attention to in Dynasty. How does that influence Roquan in terms of how high he is if Trenton Simpson comes on and has a really good year? Does that cause him to drop? I don't know. Going to my 5, another linebacker that you know very well, Zaire Franklin. Guy just balls out. Him and EJ Speed had such a great year last year together on the field. No more Shaq Leonard in Indianapolis. It's the Zaire Franklin show, the linebacking room there, the total tackles, the solo tackles, you name it. This guy is a tackling machine. Who's your LB5?
So I'm with you. I had Franklin as my 4, and I had Bobby Okereke as my 5. So Franklin is my next guy there with you. That as my 4. I mean, a former 7th round pick, a guy that just earned his stripes on special teams, and then when he got a shot to shine, he did it. I mean, a former Syracuse player, I love him. The guy has just made crazy good plays. As a huge Shaq Leonard fan, huge Colts fan, I was really upset to see him go, but it was pretty clear when you watched the film last year that Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed were the better linebackers. And with Kenny Moore there in the slot, playing that slot nickel, they just pretty much had abandoned the 3 linebacker set and gone to 2 linebackers. And Shaq was kind of the odd man out. And with him making the money he was making, it made him very hard, I think, on the coaching staff to put EJ Speed in over Shaq. And I just think EJ Speed is a guy. He's like a Franklin. It's taken him a couple years to kind of really, I hate to say it, get up to speed, but it's taken him a little bit to get up there. But he's a guy that he's kind of coming in his own now. He's a couple years in the league, kind of like Franklin. It just took him a little while to get it together and kind of figure it out. But man, I tell you what, those are super athletic guys. And if you look at the way they run their defense, their D line isn't making a lot of tackles. They're basically coming off the edges, trying to rush the passer and funnel everything to the linebackers. I think both those guys have a shot to have a possible top 10, top 15 season. I think if Franklin stays healthy, it's going to be very hard to see him finish outside the top 5 for me, I think.
I guess part of the reason I don't have Franklin bumped up a little bit higher is, you look at, you brought up a very good line as far as like the defensive line, but let's look at the major upgrade that happened in the NFL draft with Liatu Latu going to, the Indianapolis Colts there. Does his presence and him being now included in that pass rushing rotation, which is unfortunate that it is a rotation versus having just 2 guys there every single snap, every single play. Does that, addition of Liatu Latu, in your opinion, does it help reduce the necessity for using Franklin or EJ Speed in terms of pass rushing situations or blitzing?
I don't think so. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of rushes blitzing from those guys. They use it in kind of specific situations. It wasn't like, hey, we bring these guys all the time. They kind of use it when they could.
I guess like a type role, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I like the upgrade at DN. I like a ton. I think it was a great draft pick, especially getting that 15. I was really wanting to see Brock Bowers on the Colts, but he didn't get there. But Latu, I thought, was great defensive pickup. I think both those linebackers are going to be really good, and I really think they're going to rush hard from the outside and funnel to those guys. And if you look at the quarterbacks in the AFC South, got some guys that can move, guys that can run, even if they're not a running quarterback, even if they're not Lamar. I mean, Will Levis can run a little bit. CJ Stroud isn't a stone statue in the back there. Those guys can move. So I think if you get those guys funneling into those linebackers who can step up, get a tackle as they're rushing, trying to break out of the pocket, or my favorite thing ever is when the linebacker comes up to fill the hole and gets a sack, not blitzing, tackle behind the line of scrimmage. That's the perfect IDP fantasy stat for you. Your guy just steps up and makes the tackle before the quarterback gets out of there. So I think the defense being better. I think the key is the secondary being better is going to help those guys, because the secondary was so awful last year that it really forced them to do some different things they didn't want to do on defense because they were so bad and they had to bring so much heat because they just knew no one could stay with anyone. So I think the secondary improving will help the linebackers make more tackles.
I pay attention to everything you just said, but now I can't stop looking at it. How the way the screen behind us, is right now. It's like you are the head, and then there's Roquan Smith's body beneath your head. It's like there's yeah. Like you're basically
just need to sit a little higher, and then I can be right in his helmet.
Okay, so I had Zaire Franklin. Who's the next running back on your list here? As we get
So then I had Okereke at 5, Ernest Jones at 6, which you already had. My guy at 7 was Fred Warner from the Niners.
yeah, especially with Drake Greenlaw, probably not going to be ready for the start of the season. Heartbreaking that injury coming out in the second half of the Super Bowl to just tear your Achilles tendon and just like that. I mean, we may not see him at all.
I wouldn't if I was in a redraft, I would be avoiding him 100%. Even if he does come back, it's just man, it's gonna be so hard for him to make an impact at that point in the season. I thought them going out and getting Campbell was a
Campbell.
nice move by the Niners. Campbell a little bit older. Packers just keep adding young linebackers. I thought it was a smart move. I don't know if he's going to get the stats he's had in the past, but I think it's a nice football addition for the Niners. A guy that just knows the system and can get in there and make plays, and especially you want that experience when you're a team that thinks you're competing for a Super Bowl.
100%. My next linebacker going down my list is the aforementioned Nick Bolton. We talked about him when we were going. He was your earlier linebacker ranked. For me, my number 7 linebacker is Bobby Wagner. New location. I'm predicting the same.
Same Bobby Wagner. I had him at 8, so I'm right with you. I had him right here.
I don't know if you saw, I think it was like Mike Clay or somebody at ESPN ranked the top linebacking units in all of the NFL. And you know who was number 1? Washington. I mean, you have Luvu there, you have Wagner there, you have Jamin Davis, who is not going to jail apparently, which we found out a couple months ago, which that helped my dynasty shares a lot. Look, he plays for Seattle for so long, is super productive. Goes to the Los Angeles Rams. Oh, guess what? He's super productive. Goes back to Seattle the year after that. Oh my God, last year super productive. And that's with Jordan Brooks being there, potentially siphoning away tackling opportunities. He finished, I want to say, for Fantasy Pro scoring as like a top 12 linebacker. So now he's going to Washington. I'm not, look, you guys know I'm a Commanders fan, guys and gals know I'm a Commanders fan. I'm not expecting much aside from the defense being on the field, probably a little bit more than I'd want. He's just gonna rack up so many tackles. Like the guy is tackle machine. He's a tackle machine. If the IDP community had an IDP Hall of Fame, he would be the trophy that they would hand linebackers to. You know what I mean? Like this guy is just I can't say enough about him. Going to my LB8, again, we talked about it just a few minutes ago. Fred Warner. So these guys, you and I are pretty chalk when it comes to kind of like right around this middle of the top 10. Where are you at now? What's the next player you have listed?
Yeah, like I said, I was right there with you at Wagner. I had Wagner at 8. I just think he's going to make play. He, in 2 of my leagues, again, I'm not playing off the regular scoring, but he was number 2 and number 3 in 2 of my high IDP leagues in scoring for linebackers. So, I mean, he's a guy you cannot count out. I think he is going to continue to be a great value in redraft. People kind of forget about the older guys. To me, he has a chance to be one of the steals. New team, people are going to kind of forget about him. I love Wagner. Nobody is as consistent as he is. The guy just makes tackles. Guy makes tackles in his sleep. I mean, he just is tackling everybody. I love Bobby Wagner.
No, 100% agree. Who's the next linebacker you got going?
So for me, at what I got number 9 for me, I've got Quincy Williams from the Jets. I like Quincy Williams a lot. I think he keeps improving. I think his Jets defense is good. I think he's learning more and more every year from CJ Mosley. I have them both right there. I love CJ Mosley. I'm going to say I got CJ Mosley 12. So I still have both those guys really high. I think are going to be maybe the most productive linebacker duo in the league this year. I like both of them a lot. Quincy Williams to me is just so underrated for what production you've got out of him the last couple of years. It still feels like he's not a household name for linebackers. I don't understand it.
No, and this tandem has been just fantastic in the Robert Saleh era for linebackers. 100% with you right there. My next guy is one of these players where, if there was any um, doubt that I was crossing over my dynasty mentality into redraft mentality, this should do away with that. And that's Levante David. Like the guy just tackles so much. I can't quench Levante, And it's funny, out of the linebackers that I expected to be with the Buccaneers long term, I did not expect it to be him. I always thought it was going to be
You would have
Devin
thought
White.
it'd been a lot of other guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, you know, going back to back years with over 100, uh, close to 130 tackles, back to back years, total tackles, 80 and 86 solos. The guy's just, again, a veteran tackling machine. He's a more consistent tackler. He's a more, and this is sacrilege for those who know me and how much I like this player, but he is a more consistent um, Demario Davis in New Orleans. And I just feel like the Bucks, they are a playoff team. I'm a little concerned as far as like, was this exceeding expectations year for the Buccaneers last year? Dave Canales, which was a huge component of Baker Mayfield's maturation on offense, is no longer there. What happens with this offense? Is going back to, are they going to be a college team, a playoff team this year? But regardless of that, whether they're a good team or a bad team, Levante David is like the constant tackler there on that team.
I didn't have David in my top 15, but he's in my top 20. And again, he's one of those guys I think people just kind of forget about him. And he just always seems like a good value because he seems like those guys you look at and you're like, is this the last year he's going to be good? Is this the
Right.
last year he's going to be good? Is this the last year he's going to be good? And he keeps just kind of hanging around. And obviously the Bucks think enough of him that they've let other guys move on and they've kept him. So that's got to say something.
100%. Who's the next linebacker you got on your list?
Number 10 for me, TJ Edwards for the Bears. The fact that he came over from the Eagles and had the type of season he had last year, kind of helping replace Roquan Smith, really pumped because this defense, the second half of last year, man, they looked really good for the Bears. And this is going to be a super competitive division. I like TJ a ton. He proved to me on the transition last year that he's got it. And I think a second year in the same system with the Bears, I just think all wheels up on him. I like him a lot. I think TJ Edwards has got a ton of top 10, top 5 potential.
Right there with you at number 10, had him there. He kind of trailed off in terms of tackle volume as the season from weeks 14 and on, but where he made up for it was playing in coverage. At that point, the Bears were kind of a down and out team, and teams were just throwing all over him. And the fact that he was able to stay consistent in coverage productivity just showed you why he's such a valuable linebacker. The next one for me, going to my linebacker 11, is CJ Mosley. Like we were talking about that with Quincy Williams. Like, here's the thing. I am more confident in Mosley being the only linebacker out there than I am Quincy Williams. I think Quincy Williams his productivity is due mainly because CJ Mosley is on the field and people are like kind of running away from CJ Mosley into Quincy Williams' arms. I think CJ Mosley will just track you down and hunt you down and throw you to the ground, regardless of who he's playing next to. So I really like CJ Mosley. I know I don't think he's too old. I think obviously we're talking redraft, not dynasty, so definitely like him at 11. Got Craig Routh. How are you doing? TJ Edwards looks over to Tremaine Edmonds. You think? All right, let me start. I don't know.
Reset.
I don't know if you are aware of this, JT, but Nate Markham, myself, and Craig are huge, and I can't understate this, huge, like Donald Trump, huge, the other guy's movie junkies. Like, we can recite quotes left and right. And there's a scene at the beginning of The Other Guys where The Rock and Samuel L. Jackson are chasing these bank robbers, and these bank robbers go to the top of a roof of a building. They fire off some cables, and like slide down the cables to the getaway van, but then they cut the cables, and then you have Samuel L. Jackson and The Rock saying, "Well, you know what I'm thinking? I know what you're thinking. Aim for the bushes." Okay, so they're going to jump off the top of the building onto some bushes, land safely, and then chase the robbers, right? So then you have, the Foo Fighters song playing, "There goes my hero, watch him as he goes," and they jump off the building, and they're falling, and you're just like, okay, they're falling, and I'm just like, they're falling, and then you start looking at what's beneath them, and it's like, there are no bushes right there. Where are they jumping to? They're falling, and then all of a sudden, splat, and you're just like, oh my god. So
I have seen that movie like one time, and now I feel like I've heard you guys quote a couple times. I was like, I'm missing out. I have to go back and watch this at least 2 or 3 more times. That's so funny.
it is.
I definitely that's on the list. I got to watch that this weekend.
Thank you, Craig, for bringing that gem back into rotation. Love it. All right, who's your next linebacker? I just said C.J. Mosley. Who's your number 12?
So I had C.J. Mosley as my 12.
Okay.
My number 11 is Patrick Queen.
Ooh.
Moving over to the Steelers, I think this to me, this is going out on a limb a little because people are like, can he be the man on the Steelers? And I have to be honest with you, as I always like to tell people, I am a Colts and Steelers guy. My number one signing I wanted in the offseason was I wanted the Steelers to sign Patrick Queen. Like that was my one. All my Steelers friends, my cousin that's huge Steelers fan, made me a Steelers fan, texting back and forth. I was like, dude, Patrick Queen would be awesome. I'm like, there's no way we're getting him. But God, it would be awesome. But yeah, I think he ends up shining on this team as the number one guy here with the way that they run the 3-4, the way they blitz guys and move guys in and out. I'm super excited. I think, the biggest question with him is how does he fit with this defense the first year? And redraft is you might be taking a little chance on him. Obviously Dynasty, he's young, still got a lot of years, but man, I really like Queen on the Steelers team. They just so many injuries at linebacker last year. I just think he's so athletic. He was what they were missing last year with Roberts, and when Holcomb got hurt. I like Roberts, but he's just a straight tackler, run at the ball, can't pass cover at all. I just think I like Queen a ton. He might get off to a slow start in a redraft, but I think he comes on at the end of the year. I think once he learns this system, I just think he is a great inside linebacker for this team.
So Craig in the chat, Justin thinks Queen turns into a king this year, apparently.
Absolutely, I do. I think playing next to Roquan Smith, I think he learned a ton. At least I hope so. I think he really did. And I think he learned a lot, and I think he's going to move that over in Pittsburgh. And I just think their defense is so much improved, and with him in the middle, that's what they were missing last year. So I just love him going to a team that I really think the Steelers have a top 5 unit on defense this year. And I think he's going to be one of those guys that just gets a lot of the tackles because of it.
All right, before we keep going, let's recap our top 12. Let me go with my top 12 first, and JT, yours next, as we're approaching LB 15, as well as the end of today's show, which, by the way, thank you, all of you, for paying attention and joining us here on Shoot the Gap. My early, again, prefacing this, early linebacker redraft rankings start off with Bobby Okereke, then Foyce Aluakin, Ernest Jones, Roquan Smith, Zaire Franklin, Nick Bolton, Bobby Wagner, Fred Warner, Levante David, TJ Edwards, CJ Mosley, and then my number 12 linebacker is Alex Singleton, who we'll get into in a little bit. Who are your top 12 there, JT?
Yep, I got Roquan Smith, Foyce Aluakin. I always mess up his name, is my number 2. Nick Bolton's my 3. Zaire Franklin, my 4. Bobby Okereke is my 5. Ernest Jones is my 6. Fred Warner at 7. Bobby Wagner 8. Quincy Williams 9. TJ Edwards 10. Patrick Queen 11. And CJ Mosley 12 is what I've got currently.
I love Alex Singleton. The guy just is a tackling machine. Am I scared of Cody Barton? Is what it all comes down to. I'm not scared of Cody Barton. I'm sorry, I can't be scared. I refuse to be scared of Cody Barton. checks Cody Barton is available on waivers week 8. Okay, I'll just add him to my bench just in case.
Absolutely.
But neither here nor there. Again, like we were talking early rankings. I'm not scared of Cody Barton. I think Alex Singleton, the snaps are not going anywhere. The question is Cody Barton going to take away Josie Jewell's? Josie Jewell is still a Bronco, if memory serves me correctly.
I need to look at that because I'm pretty sure he is on the Panthers. I
So
need to look that up right now.
No, you're good.
I'm looking it up right this second. Give me 2 seconds. I'm almost positive that he
I think you're right.
Moved to the Panthers.
So you have Barton as the replacement for Josie Jewell. There we go.
Yes, exactly.
Look, Barton is wildly inefficient. Tons of missed tackle percentages. Not a fan. Give me the more consistent Alex Singleton at 12. Getting to, let's see here. Let's go to Wallbang.
Yes, that is correct. So right now, if you looked at our lads, they've got Singleton and Barton as the 2 starting inside linebackers in the 3-4 Broncos defense.
We have a question here from Wallbang. How do you guys feel as far as Tyrell Dodson is concerned here? What are your thoughts on Tyrell Dodson here, JT?
So he's an interesting one. I've really been kind of looking at him because I've seen a lot of drafts. I've seen him kind of go all over the place, and it's like I don't 100% know how I should feel about him because he moved on from the Bills to the Seahawks.
Right.
The question is, what is going to happen there in Seattle with the linebackers? Jerome Baker's there as well. So this is the thing. They've got a lot of new guys. Tyrese Knight, the rookie out of UTEP, they drafted there as well. So I'm just not 100% sure how that's going to look. I feel like Baker or Dotson, I feel like one of them's going to hit this year, especially in redraft. I'm just not 100% sure if I know which one yet. You know what I'm saying? I don't think both of them are going to be super high end guys, but I feel like one of them will be. And so if you're buying low, I like the shot if you're buying low on him, especially in redraft, because anytime linebackers change teams outside of a Bobby Wagner, who's just gonna tackle no matter where he's at, I think there's always a little bit of a worry how those guys are going to fit in. I like both of them. I don't know how much I love Dotson. I think he was more of a product of all the injuries in Buffalo, and he kind of got on the field because of the injuries. Can he be a legit guy this year? Possibly. I don't love Jerome Baker either, but if I had to pick between Dotson and Baker, personally, redraft this year, I'm taking Baker.
There we go. Let's get into let's round up our last couple of players here. Who's your LB 13?
13. This is a guy I really like. And, I've talked about him a few times here on Shoot the Gap. But Azeez Al-Shaair, now from the Titans to the Texans, he made a ton of tackles for the Titans because they just didn't have a very good defense. He's now on a really good defense. Now, does that mean he loses a lot of tackle share because the defense is a lot better? I think that division is going to be super competitive. I think Houston, because they won division, has a much, much tougher schedule than last year. I think they're going to be in a lot of battles this year. So I think he's going to be a guy. D'Amico Ryans loved him. He went out and was like, we got to get this guy. He had him when he was in San Francisco when he was a backup. That tells you something. He's like, hey, I knew this guy was going to be good. I like this guy from the beginning. For me, he ends up being the number 1 linebacker for the Texans. I love their edge. He, to me, fits in the Patrick Queen spot. They have such good edge rushers. They're going to bring the heat everywhere that I think those guys are going to make so many more plays in the middle of the field. And so I feel like him and Queen, to me, are in that same mold where I think they make a lot of plays just because I love everyone else on their team around them. I think everyone else is going to make those guys better because of it. So he's a guy. I love the move of the Texans. I think that defense is really good. And I just really like his talent. I think he's a really good player. And I think the Texans are a great fit. It's always tough to take a guy going to a new team, but I think they're a great fit for him.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Christian Harris or Henry To'oTo'o taking away too many snaps away from Azeez Al-Shaair. We saw his productivity with the 49ers when he was given, he was basically the de facto linebacker in Tennessee last year. We saw him produce. Hell, if you go over to fantasyinframes.com on our homepage, you get to see an article that JT wrote about Aziz Al-Shaair, so go check that out.
Absolutely.
So here's my 15. So we can skip him when we get to 15 because you summed it up right there in the nutshell. Oh, I'm in the nutshell. That was an Austin Powers reference for those who didn't get that, just so you know. My LB13 is Quay Walker. Goodbye, Devondre Campbell. Goodbye, my 1A to my 1B. Edrin Cooper's in town. He can be the pass rush specialist or the coverage specialist. Let me just be a thumper, get my tackles, and be on my way. You love to see it. Love to finally see the opportunity for Quay Walker to finally get that role there for the Green Bay Packers. Yeah. Who's your next one, JT?
Next guy for me, number 14 on my list is Logan Wilson for the Bengals. Guy's been out there for a couple years now making plays. Him and Pratt are basically the top two linebackers. He's pretty much clearly their number one. The guy keeps putting up stats. I think the Bengals, especially in redraft, I think the Bengals might be in trouble this year. I think they got a lot of tough games. I think their defense is the worst defense in the division. And I think Wilson's going to end up having to make a ton of plays on this team. I think they're going to be facing some really good offenses where they're going to have to make a lot of plays. Wilson as a player, I have to be honest, I don't love him as a player, but he just gets you enough stats in IDP. If I was a coach, would I be super pumped about Logan Wilson? I don't know. But as an IDP owner, he's on the field enough and he makes the plays and he ends up scoring for you. So to me, it's enough to be in my top 15. He's pretty consistently been there the last couple of years. I have him on a bunch of IDP teams, and he's a plug and play every week.
No, I love it. I love exactly. It's the plug and play aspect that you don't have to worry about. That he is their de facto linebacker there. Although I love Jermaine Pratt, I'm a huge fan of Jermaine Pratt. I think he also goes I think he's very undervalued.
Pratt, I feel like, is the steal. Like if you're going in and you're looking for like a guy that's going to be really good on your team, but you can get really late in drafts, I feel like Pratt's always a steal. He's a guy I have on quite a few rosters because he's going. I mean, I don't have the ADP in front of me, but he's going. I mean, a lot of rounds later than Wilson.
Rounding out my last linebacker here is, and this is where, the dynasty mind and the redraft mind have met and they've melded and one cannot, supersede the other. So I'm just going to give the fight to the redraft side of my brain. And that is now entering his third season in 2022 as a rookie, 59 solo tackles to 56 assisted tackles. Last year, saw the jump made, 75 total solo tackles to 52 assisted tackles. We're seeing that solo to assist come up here. I'm talking about Devin Lloyd. It's rare for me to have two linebackers on the same team within the top 15. But I just love the upside. I love what he does. And it's straight tackling. Like he doesn't do anything rushing the passer, doesn't blitz. He doesn't do anything in coverage. He's just a tackling machine for such a young player. And again, it's probably somebody that you can probably get later on in your drafts, just because I have him ranked, where I do doesn't mean most people do. And so there's value to be had there. So me personally, I'd be happy if you're going off of my rankings and you can find, Devin Lloyd there, your LB 14, when everybody else is taking, higher, linebackers in terms of ADP, have it because I love Devin Lloyd. Any thoughts on Devin Lloyd there before we get to the last?
I tell you what, I was a guy who was never high on Devin Lloyd, and I think I've just been wrong. I didn't like him, and here's what I'm telling you why I didn't like him. I really like Chad Muma. I thought Chad Muma should have been in the lineup a ton more. And then this last year, it was like he got zero playing time. And then when he did, he didn't look good. And it was
bad.
like, what has happened to Chad Muma? I just thought Muma was better than him, and it was a completely draft capital thing because they took Lloyd early. Muma was late. So I was always a Muma guy. I was like, hey, for the price, give me Muma. I think at this point, the Jags, they've spoken. They're like, hey, we like Lloyd. We don't really like Muma. So I think I've got to move off Muma at this point. I think, like you said, because he's really the linebacker two for them, people kind of are like, how many tackles is he going to get? But he does. He still gets a ton, even though he is the linebacker two for them. So I like that that move. I've always had in my brain is I always have a hard time taking Lloyd because again, like I said, I just have Muma on so many teams that it's like I just keep waiting for it to happen. I think that's one of the hills I'm going to end up dying on. Is Muma should be really good. I want him on another team, and I don't
Right.
know if it's ever going to happen.
No, I hear you. I had Chad Muma for a year, and then I moved on really quickly because I just was so disappointed with the production. And
I know. I loved his college tape.
yeah,
He was just, oh man, just nose for the ball. I loved everything about him, and the situation has not been good for him there. So it's you're right. It's time to move on. I know I'll hold on for one more season because I can't help myself. But it's yeah, you're right. I think Lloyd's a good pick by you there.
who's your 15?
So for going back to the guy we talked about briefly earlier, Jordan Brooks. Now on
Mm.
the Dolphins instead of the Seahawks. Here's why. Jordan Brooks, we know he can be productive. We know he can put up a ton of fantasy points for IDP. And I hate the linebacking core for the Dolphins. I really do. I don't like him at all. So I think Jordan Brooks is going to be the guy. I'm not a big David Long guy. I was a big Anthony Walker Jr. fan earlier in my career, his career when he played for the Colts. I liked him a lot. He's dealt with a ton of injuries when he was with Cleveland. I don't see if there is a bounce back for him at this point. It's just been too many years. I just don't think he has it back in him. And beyond those two guys, Channing Tindall, maybe. I
Mm,
mean, come on. I mean,
okay. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, I mean, with them, kind of switching out to the 3-4 defense and then, basically Phillips and Bradley Chubb and Barrett and then drafting Chop Robinson on the corner. I mean, they're basically, they're in a situation where they're going to play two inside linebackers and a decent amount. They're probably going to play one. I think it ends up being Jordan Brooks.
So
And
you think
so
the long experiment is gone? It's over.
I just don't love Long. I've never been a big Long fan. I think he's done okay in IDP. I just don't think he's an actually very good NFL linebacker. And so I just think they've kind of like fought through trying to find a guy, trying to find a guy. I just think Jordan Brooks is way more talented. I think he's going to get into camp. The coach is going to look at him and be like, I know the
You
guy
win.
came off an injury, but he's way better than the guys we have. And I just think Jordan Brooks ends up being the guy that's on the field almost all the time for them on defense if he can stay healthy. And again, another team that I think is going to be in a ton of shootouts, is going to be in a ton of close games because the division they're in. I just think Jordan Brooks gets back to form. He doesn't have Bobby Wagner next to him. It's you know, like I just said, a little bit of Patrick Queen, a little Alex Shazier. Guys are kind of like, can they be the star now? Can Jordan Brooks be the star by himself? I think he can on that team. So
Right.
in redraft, I'm willing to take the shot at him at 15.
Nice. Well, folks, that's going to wrap up our early redraft rankings at linebacker top 15. To see my rankings, I got my top 24 up over at fantasyinframes.com. Just go to our rankings pull down menu and select IDP draft rankings, and you'll find them there. I'll have more positions filled out as we get closer, obviously, to redraft season, but obviously we'll be talking about, another position next week. So look out for a top 24 edge rusher, defensive lineman next week from both of us here. Uh, JT, where can they find your rankings?
Yeah, you can find me on DLF. I got my top 150 on there. Actually, as soon as the show's over, I'm going to jump on and re-update my rankings for tomorrow. So that's on my list to do tonight. So jumping in there, you can go in, see where everybody's ranked, top 5 guys on DLF, where we have everybody ranked. But then you can go and click on LB directly, and you can see where I have my linebackers for Dynasty. A lot of these guys are in there, a little bit different position on Dynasty compared to Redraft, but a lot of these guys are still in the mix. But you can find all that over at DLF.
Nice. And just for those who did not hear last hour, really awesome news. The godfather of IDP, Gary Davenport, is officially a fantasy and framer. He just wrote his first article for Fantasy and Frames, 5 value picks at the in IDP, which will be coming out Friday morning. So again, Gary Davenport, the guy who writes for Bleacher Report, NBC, Football Guys, you name it, everywhere. We were very fortunate to have him as a friend of the Fantasy and Frames family, and we look forward to getting his article content out starting this Friday. So welcome to the fam, Gary. And for everybody else for tuning in, thank you very much. If you haven't already, head over to our YouTube and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell so you're notified when Fantasy and Frames puts out fantastic fantasy football content, which we pride ourselves in doing our best, and we think we have a pretty good track record of showing that. So thank you very much for all you supporters out there. Don't forget to follow us, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, here on X or YouTube, at Fantasy and Frames. Don't forget to go to fantasyinframes.com, read our articles, check out all of our rankings. We got everything from Dynasty to Redraft to IDP to college to best ball. Tomorrow we got Fantasy Football Weekly, our weekly episodic show here on our channels, where we just cover what's hot in the world of fantasy football for the week, things you should know about. We'll be talking about our guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fantasy Football Weekly, who are our guys that we need to leave drafts with this early on in the season. And then we predict what we need to leave drafts with when we get to August. And then tomorrow night, stay tuned for the Fantasy Football Draft Show, doing another Scott Fishbowl expert mock. Got a lot of people from the Fantasy and Frames family joining us, as well as a few guests that I'm going to let Stacey Perez introduce tomorrow night. So stay tuned for that. Woo! We did a lot, man. It's you and I. We've been doing this since 7:00 this morning.
Yeah, a lot. We went through a lot of info tonight. A lot of stuff. It's been great. I'm going to be off camera, but I'm going to be drafting tomorrow in the Scott Fish Bowl mock draft. I did the one last week. I did a couple stack things out of the 1-4. I'm in the 1-5 tomorrow. So trying out some different things, seeing where guys hit. So I always love doing these and love watching them, because my live draft is in a couple weeks in Cincinnati. So I'm trying to get a feel for where things are at and all that, because the live draft is another beast in itself. You can't just sit there and look at all the ADP. You got to make a move right away. So it's going to be really interesting. I love all the mock drafts for SP14. It's been great.
100%. And so therefore for JT, I'm Jorge. As it says on the bottom of the screen, scrolling, Huck Tua. Let's talk IDP. For those who don't get that, go on TikTok and Instagram. You'll thank me later. And enjoy the rest of your evening, folks. Take care.